The Amanda Project by Melissa Kantor and Amanda Valentino. Chapter 30. 4 o'clock found me and my bike at the town green. I hadn't been able to come up with a list of special places besides just desserts, but she had said it was her favorite place to get a frappuccino, so that was something. Then there was the tattoo place where we'd all gotten henna tattoos, but I'd gotten the feeling that Amanda wasn't really a regular there. One time we'd gone for a ride through Peak Park, and Amanda said she absolutely loved being in this little gazebo by the lake at sunset, so that and just desserts were the 2 places I decided we might possibly find her. It was a beautiful, clear day with a hint of spring in the air. If ever there was going to be an evening to enjoy a cup of coffee al fresco while appreciating a beautiful sunset, it would be tonight. I almost didn't recognize Nia when she pulled up to me on her bike. She was wearing a short, vintage black dress, a black sweater, high heels, and serious cat-eye glasses, and she had a long cigarette-less cigarette holder between her bright red lips. I had no idea how she'd been able to bike in that getup. Hi. She managed a fairly elegant dismount, and I had to admit. Hi, I said. What's with the duds? Audrey Hepburn Film Festival at the Villa, said Nia, naming Orion's Art Cinema, where Amanda and I had seen 2001. No way she'd miss it, that is, if she's still here. Nia's skin was the color of caramel, her eyes outlined in kohl propped behind her snazzy glasses. When exactly had Nia Rivera gotten so pretty? Apparently when no one was looking. I, meanwhile, had on an old pair of jeans and hiking boots in case we decided to hide out in the bushes and wait for Amanda at the gazebo. And just to make it lovelier, I tucked my jeans into a plaid sock on one side for biking, and my sweatshirt had a huge shamrock on the front and said Bill's Tavern on the back. If Nia looked like Audrey Hepburn, I looked like Audrey Hepburn's leprechaun, fashion-impaired sister. A minute later, Hal pulled up on his bike. I recognized him. He was dressed almost as oddly as Nia. Bonjour. He tipped his beret at us. He had on a black turtleneck and black jeans. Bonjour, said Nia. Now it was her turn to ask, what's with the duds? Poetry slam at the Aqua, said Hal. It was her favorite coffee shop. Aqua? I said. She never mentioned Aqua to me. Just desserts was her favorite coffee place. She didn't even drink coffee, protested Nia, taking the cigarette out of her mouth. She said caffeine was poison. You're joking, right? Hal adjusted his beret. That girl could down a double latte before you could say fair trade organic roast. Look, whatever else we do, we need to be in Peak Park at sunset, I intervened. She had this place that she liked to go to watch the sunset whenever she had the chance. Shockingly, neither Nia nor Hal had a competing sunset location. Sun should set around 6, Hal shrugged, so we have some time to go someplace else before then. Play it again, Sam, Nia asserted forcefully as usual. Excuse me? Said Hal. Play it again, Sam, said Nia, her favorite vintage clothing store. Anyone got an alternative favorite vintage store? Asked Hal. And when I shook my head, the 3 of us got on our bikes and followed Nia off the green and down Main Street. Within a few blocks, she'd pulled off Main and made a half-dozen turns until even I, who'd lived in Orion my whole life, was feeling lost. How had Amanda even found this place? Play It Again, Sam turned out to be an old Victorian house, not unlike the one Amanda had told me she lived in, only much shabbier and painted in outrageous peeling shades of pink and purple. Nia dismounted, and the 3 of us leaned our bikes against the porch. But when we pushed open the door of the shop, the sound of the twinkling bell was drowned out by a woman bellowing, Sorry, we're closed. Hi, called Nia, either because she hadn't heard what the woman said or because she decided to ignore it. Closed, repeated the voice, and I could now see it was emanating from a tall black woman standing at the back of the store. I had never seen such a tightly packed room. There was literally clothing everywhere. The floors, the walls, dresses and shoes even hung from the ceiling, and as I tried to make my way in, I was clocked in the head by a pair of shiny white platform boots. Hi, called Nia again. We were hoping you could help us. The woman came forward, brushing at her nearly shaved head as if the store were as dusty as it was cluttered. She was wearing a tight-fitting Sgt. Pepper-style red jacket on top and billowy silk jumpers and sapphire on the bottom. On her feet were gold slippers that curled up at pom-pom toes. "I'd be happy to," said the woman, "but not today. I'm doing inventory. Come back tomorrow." Inventory? How could you possibly do inventory in such a chaotic place, and in a day? Looking around, I calculated that 10 people working 24-hour days could not inventory this store in a month. "We're actually not looking for clothes. We're looking for a friend," said Nia. The woman looked Nia up and down, taking in her vintage outfit and faux cigarette holder. She even reached out her hand and touched the sleeve of Nia's black sweater. "I sold that sweater just like that not long ago," mused the woman. "Shut up." "That's this sweater," said Nia, excited. "My friend gave it to me. We were looking for her." "Well, she's not here," said the woman, gesturing around the room with her arm. Given how crowded the store was, I didn't see how the woman could claim with such confidence that Amanda or anyone else wasn't in here somewhere. "Do you remember the last time you saw her?" asked Hal eagerly. "Has she been by recently?" Again, the woman took in what Hal was wearing before she answered. Given how 21st century American my jeans and sweatshirt were, I figured I'd better not call attention to myself. "Ooh," she sighed, rubbing the side of her nose. "She's in a lot." "Do you remember when the last time was?" pressed Hal. "This week? Last week?" She thought for a minute, then shook her head. "Sorry, I really can't remember. Now, if you'll excuse me, I gotta get back to work." "Did she ever give you an address?" I asked suddenly. "Or charge something on a credit card?" As I'd anticipated, my wardrobe evaluation didn't go as swimmingly as Hal's and Nia's. The woman gave me a quick once-over, then shook her head. She was obviously not impressed. "I really can't recall, and I'm not sure I'd tell you if I could." "Well, thank you so much," said Nia quickly. "You've been tremendously helpful." "Yeah, thanks," said Hal. He'd taken off his beret when he was talking to her, but now he put it back on. Even someone as cute as Hal looks pretty dorky in a beret, and I hoped he wasn't coming to like it. "Well, so much for that," said Nia as the door shut behind us. "Sunset?" "Sunset," said Hal. I don't know quite what we'd been expecting to find, but when we got to the gazebo, it was deserted. Over the next hour, while we sat on a bench watching, half a dozen elderly people and 2 families came by. While the kids fed the ducks, Nia and Hal and I tried to figure out how to make the best use of tonight. "We've got to divide and conquer," said Hal. "I'll go to the poetry slam. Callie, you check out Just Desserts. Nia, you go to the film festival." "I think they're playing 3 movies at a time," said Nia, "so rather than go into one of them, I'll probably just look around the lobby and hope to catch her there." She looked at her wrist. "I should probably go soon," she said. "I think they've had a movie that started already. Should we synchronize watches or anything before I leave?" We checked that our watches were all more or less the same, then agreed that I would wait until the sun had completely set before heading to Just Desserts. Since Nia had to be home by 10, Hal and I would get to the theater by 9:30 and meet up with her, then we'd wait for the last movie to get out. Not surprisingly, Amanda didn't show up at the park, and when I got to Just Desserts, which was packed with college kids, she wasn't there either. I bought a cappuccino and drank it as slowly as I possibly could, but I was still finished with it long before 7. My stomach was growling. I ordered another one, wondering how I was going to survive on nothing but caffeinated beverages and biscotti for the next 2.5 hours. I don't know if it was the caffeine or the fact that I'd come in hopes of seeing Amanda, but by 8 o'clock I was itchy and impatient for her to show up, as I would have been if we'd actually agreed to meet at Just Desserts, and she was late. I kept checking my watch and looking around. As 8 became 9, I found myself leaning forward each time the door opened and sitting back disappointed when the person who came in wasn't Amanda. I waited until 9:15 before I left, so sizzled from all the coffee I was worried my heart wasn't beating properly. I made it to the villa in less than 10 minutes, which was no doubt an all-time record for someone going from the hill to downtown. I wasn't completely sure my wheels actually touched pavement more than once or twice during the ride down. I spotted Nia in front of the theater immediately. She was pacing back and forth under the marquee, checking her watch and the doors every second or so. When I called her name, she practically fell into my arms. "Oh my God, this is impossible," she said. "What?" I asked. My whole body was shaking. I needed to eat something or I was going to start levitating soon. "For all I know, she's here and I missed her," said Nia, throwing up her arms in frustration. Seriously, Nia? What are you jabbering about? She grabbed me by the arm and handed me a ticket. Look. I followed Nia into the packed lobby, and within a minute I knew exactly what she meant. Inside, the villa was wall-to-wall Audrey Hepburn. The guys who were there were dressed regularly, maybe a few more than usual in slightly dated suits. But almost every single woman was wearing a wig or a vintage dress or holding a cigarette holder with or without a cigarette. The room was smoky and noisy, and I realized there was a bar set up at one end, which we usually don't have at the villa. It was like we dropped into one of the parties at Breakfast at Tiffany's. I took a step away from Nia, and when I turned around, I couldn't find her anywhere at first. Then I saw her standing with her back to me by a poster for charade. Hey, I said, touching the sleeve of her black sweater. I thought I'd lost you. But instead of Nia, some woman I'd never seen before turned to face me. I'm sorry, she said. She was way older than Nia, and her cigarette holder had a cigarette lit in it. A cloud of smoke blew in my face. No, I'm sorry, I said, coughing and backing away from her. A second later, there was a tug at my sleeve, and I looked over to see the real Nia standing next to me. It's you, right? I said. See what I mean? She asked. This is absurd, and I have to get home soon. Okay. I tried to stay calm even as the caffeine urged the opposite. Don't panic. You go outside and wait for me and Hal there. I'm going to circle the lobby. Remember, there's still people inside the theater. This is probably only a third of the audience. They're waiting to see the 9:50 show. Outside, I said firmly, feeling her panic start to spread through my already jittery body. I watched Nia leave through the glass doors, then started to make my way through the lobby looking for Amanda. It was like a bad dream. Everywhere I looked, there was a woman or a girl, and once I recognized it was someone, a guy in drag, who could have been Amanda dressed as Audrey Hepburn. The lobby was so crowded, I barely managed to circle it once, and people started pouring out of the theater onto the second floor. I couldn't believe it. I was supposed to navigate a bigger crowd? I was actually relieved when I looked at my watch and realized if I didn't head outside, I was going to miss Nia. She and Hal were on the sidewalk, facing the lobby doors, both of them with defeated looks on their faces. As I walked toward them, I turned slightly to face the lobby, and I could see why they looked the way they did. If anything, the crowd looked even denser and more impenetrable from here than it felt inside. Hey, I said. Poetry Slam was a bust, said Hal. I gotta go, said Nia. I'm really sorry. Hal waved away her apology. Don't sweat it, he said. We can take over from here. But take over clearly translated into fail satisfactorily. By 10:45, when the last movie got out, we were no closer to finding Amanda than before. Hal looked at me, and I looked at him, as the last stragglers exited the theater. Bust, I said glumly. Hal nodded. I told my dad I'd be home by midnight, I said. When I left the house, he hadn't asked for a time I'd be home, but since he was staying sober and giving me spending money, I figured the least I could do was let him know my ETA. He'd just called up, "Have fun," from his workshop, but I hoped he'd appreciated the gesture nonetheless. She once mentioned seeing a band at Arcadia, said Hal. You know that all-ages club downtown? Want to try it? I asked. Hal shrugged. Nothing to lose. We unlocked our bikes and followed Hal onto the street. Oh, and Hal? He put his foot back on the sidewalk and turned to face me. Yeah? I gave him the appraising look. Maybe we should lose the beret. Gotcha. He smiled and pushed off from the curb. As he gained speed, he pulled the beret off his head and stuffed it into his back pocket without slowing down. I'd never been to Arcadia, but Hal clearly had. We made our way through Orion's mostly deserted streets to an industrial area of town. It was dark here, and the pavement was pitted with potholes. Just as I was about to suggest to Hal that we forget the whole go to the club thing, he pointed, saying, "It's just up ahead." A crowd was milling around outside the brick warehouse that didn't look very different from all the other warehouses around us, except this one had a neon-lit door while the others were dark. A black and white sign on the wall read, "Punk rock is for losers," with today's date. At first I was like, why is punk rock for losers today only? But then I realized that was the name of the band. We paid a creepy-looking guy with a shaved head and a tattoo of a lizard circling his neck, then made our way down a dark, rickety staircase. Despite the huge warehouse we'd entered, the room we arrived in was small, maybe as big as the downstairs of my house. Still, the band was playing loudly enough to fill a major concert hall, and I could feel the music throbbing in each of my internal organs. Hal screamed something at me, but I just shook my head. He yelled again, and again I had no idea what he just said. He pointed at his eyes, then looked around the room, and I realized he was going to look around. I nodded and gave him a thumbs up, deciding I'd do the same. It was almost as crowded as the villa had been, and the search I did through the crowd was just about as pointless as my earlier search. At one point I thought I saw this weird musician girl who's in our class at Endeavor, but then I looked again and I wasn't sure it was the same chick. In truth was that everyone at Arcadia looked enough like that girl that they could have been her or could have not been her. It really wouldn't have mattered. By the time I got back to where we'd separated, Hal was waiting for me. He pressed his mouth up against my ear. "Want to leave?" he asked. I nodded and started to follow him up the stairs when all of a sudden 50 million cups of coffee I'd drunk caught up with me. For a brief second I was afraid I might actually have an accident right there. I tugged on Hal's shirt. "I'll meet you outside," I said. No way was I going to shout, "I have to pee," at the top of my lungs. He cupped his ear and shook his head. I pointed toward the exit and mouthed, "1 minute." Hal nodded. It took me about 5 minutes just to find the bathroom, and if I hadn't had to pee so bad, I would have been sorry to find it at all. The floor was sticky, and there wasn't any paper, and the seat wasn't exactly sterile. Oh well, when you gotta go, you gotta go. It wasn't until I zipped up my pants and turned to flush the toilet that I saw it. Written in bright silver pen that shone against the black of the tiles, even in the dim light of the bathroom, were 5 words, all in capital letters. "Amanda Valentino, where are you?"